The focus of my laboratory is on noroviruses and astroviruses. So these are viruses that cause diarrhea and vomiting in children, but also in adults. And we're really interested in trying to find therapeutics against these viruses. And recently we've tested the activity of lactoferrin against the human norovirus in a cell culture system, and that was recently discovered. And we were able to see that there was antiviral activity against these viruses, which is very exciting to us. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to find more compounds that prevent these virus infections and ultimately prevent these gastroenteritis outbreaks from happening.
Focus of my research are on bacterial gram-negative pathogens that cause diseases like meningitis and septicemia and gonorrhea. These organisms have to survive in a human and have to overcome the antibacterial properties of lactoferrin. And we're interested in how these bacteria are able to do that. If we can understand that, maybe we can figure out how to prevent bacterial infections that cause these types of diseases. Lactoferrin plays a key role in controlling these bacteria, and so we're trying to understand those processes.
We produce lactoferrin, and it's important for us to understand lactoferrin at the molecular level to ensure that we understand the molecule and how to produce it, and produce the correct type of product for the customers that we're working with. It's an interesting molecule, and I think its stature as a multifunctional protein opens up a number of applications in other areas other than the nutritional area.
My interest in lactoferrin came when we found that lactoferrin is increased in periodontal disease. At that time we did also investigate antimicrobial peptides. These are fragments of proteins that kill bacteria. These fragments are also present in lactoferrin. When you make parts of lactoferrin, it was already known that a small part of this lactoferrin, lactoferricin, kills bacteria. We found a second part in this protein we called lactoferrampin, what also kills bacteria. These fragments, they are lying closely together inside the complete molecule of lactoferrin. Therefore, we made a construct in which we combine these two antimicrobial peptides, these two killing parts, and look what the properties of these peptides are. This combination has superior antimicrobial activity compared to the normal peptides.
I'm interested in lactoferrin because as a cancer researcher, we want to find ways to prevent cancer's death, and we need to find new ways to block cell growth and proliferation. So as we have discussed in the conference, there are many studies that favor lactoferrin to inhibit the proliferation, and we need to work a little bit more to try to be able to bring it to the clinics so that we can have decrease the death of cancer with hopefully lactoferrin as a good treatment and targeted treatment to either block iron or decrease cell growth. And I'm very excited of participating in this conference, and I have learned a lot from different areas, and I think the nutrition part is also very important for neonatal health. And I think in this next 2 years we will see a lot of things, as now we have learned how to make better lactoferrin and do better clinical trials on it.
This has been a very productive conference on lactoferrin. Our own work was to present a trial of lactoferrin to prevent death and sepsis and complications in preterm babies. And we found that when we add that trial to all the other trials, there's a very clear signal for benefit for preterm babies in the future. We hope to collaborate with colleagues around the world, many of whom have been at this conference, to undertake even larger trials of larger doses of lactoferrin to really find out its potential for improving the outcome for these very premature and fragile babies.
On the liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry analysis of lactoferrin in biological samples. I think that the future of lactoferrin is going to be dependent upon understanding the dose relation in blood and also the physiological response, or PK/PD as we call it. And hopefully by using this method, we'll be able to advance that and get it on the market.
I am interested in lactoferrin because I'm running a clinical trial where we are testing the effects of adding lactoferrin to infant formula to healthy infants. And we are currently presenting and analyzing our first results of this study. I look forward to the next couple of years within the research of lactoferrin because there is a lot going on. Many interesting applications are being tested. In parallel, we'll continuous basic research about this protein. So there is a lot going on and a lot to await the next couple of years. I think that lactoferrin will have a role in clinical practice within a few years.
We are studying the effect of lactoferrin and lactoferrin peptides against infectious diseases and tumoral cell lines in vitro and some models in vivo. In the future, we wish to implement the effects and to prove the effect of bovine lactoferrin in vivo models and then in clinical trials with pediatricians and some other specialists in my city.
I've been involved with lactoferrin for the last 15 years. During my fellowship in neonatal medicine, I did a project using lactoferrin to prevent infections. We developed an animal model of infection and we used lactoferrin as prophylaxis as well as treatment in that animal models. And then since then, I've been trying to get clinical studies on lactoferrin up, especially in newborn babies. A lot of evidence and literature suggests that lactoferrin is a very good anti-infective agent. It's an immunomodulating agent, and there's a lot of lactoferrin in the milk of mothers who deliver preterm babies. So it all makes sense to use lactoferrin in preterm babies to do infections. More recently, I've been involved in doing systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials on lactoferrin in preterm neonates. I'm really optimistic about the use of lactoferrin in clinical medicine in the future. It's a multifunctional molecule, has actions against infections, ion chelation and immunomodulation. And maybe in neonatology, we might be using a different product or different make of lactoferrin along with prebiotics or maybe also with probiotics.
I am here attending a conference for AOAC International, which is an association from America, and they try to develop methods to analyze ingredients in infant formula. I hope we will also obtain a nice method for lactoferrin in infant formula because it's very needed. I hope that in the end we can find out what lactoferrin does for babies, where they can benefit from it, and that we can get clarity on it, because I'm sure that it has a good function. We only need to figure out which one is the most important and how we can deal with it in the future.
My interest in lactoferrin started over 30 years ago when I discovered receptors for transferrin and lactoferrin in bacteria. My major interest is the effect of lactoferrin on bacterial infections. But this conference covers many facets of lactoferrin that plays multiple roles in human infection, in human health and disease.
I first became interested in lactoferrin when a dairy company asked me to find something new in bone and milk that would be of good for bone health. And we did. After using biochemists, we found that lactoferrin was incredibly a stimulatory factor at increasing the growth of bone cells, and it actually decreased the bone resorption cells. So it was a double whammy effect of increasing bone growth, and it's a very potent stimulator of bone growth. That was my first interest in lactoferrin. Since then, we've also been wondering if we can combine the antimicrobial effects of lactoferrin with the bone growth effects, because we are also studying with orthopedic surgeons the prosthetic joint infections, and when you've got prosthetic joint infections, you've also got bone loss. So that is the thing we're studying, and we would hope that we could find a lavage or something with lactoferrin in it that could help us to stop the huge bone loss that occurs in infections, prosthetic joint infections, and to help to clear the infections.
I'm interested in lactoferrin for more than 25 years. I started with studying bovine lactoferrin and switched to recombinant human using special expression of CHO cell line, which is mammalian expression system, for making lactoferrin as fully humanized. I'm also involved in production of fusion lactoferrin, fusion with FC domain of IgG, in particularly human IgG2, for application in potential treatment, clinical utility of this molecule in ICH, which is intracerebral hemorrhage. An interesting molecule that we recently developed is a fusion of human lactoferrin with the FC domain of IgG2. This opened the potential for treatment of ICH, which is intracerebral hemorrhage, and increase the half-life of lactoferrin by factor of 8. So lactoferrin is in the circulation much longer and may produce the therapeutic effect for much longer. As far as the future for lactoferrin, I think is enormous. With all the activities that we recognize, it will be the future for perhaps adjuvant therapy using primary antibiotics and lactoferrin.
My relation with lactoferrin started several years ago when I was conducting some in vivo and in vitro studies looking at the effect of lactoferrin against enteric pathogens. More recently, I've been working on clinical trials looking at the effect of lactoferrin for prevention of diarrhea and also prevention of neonatal sepsis. For the future, I think there's still many things we can work on lactoferrin. We still have what we need, more studies in vitro and in vivo looking at the different bioactivities of lactoferrin. But from the clinical point of view, I think we need a very good product with quality control in order to so we can have a standardized product to move into clinical trials and to patient care.
We are aiming lactoferrin for the prevention of inflammatory bowel disease, in other words, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, which are background disease for the cancer development. Recently, the colon cancer development based on that disease is enormous increase. So we hope we can apply lactoferrin for the prevention research.
Teresa Ochoa from the university here in Lima in Peru. You have hosted the 14th Lactoferrin Conference. It was 1 week of amazing lectures. How do you feel?
Tired. No, we're very pleased that everything came up as planned. So I think the number of attendees was excellent, the number of conference and the scientific content of all the oral and poster presentations was excellent. So I'm very pleased with the results from this event.
Do you have any wishes for the Lactoferrin Conference in 2 years? Not for the conference itself, but from the participants, from the industry. What is your wish that if you could make one until 2 years?
So I think first to have more support from industry, so from you guys that are producing lactoferrin. So I think that's very important. especially to be able to have and continue having support for the students. No? So I think that's our goal, to have new generation of people working on lactoferrin to continue our work.
Alexei Sokolov and Vadim Vasiliev from the University in St. Petersburg and the Institute of Experimental Medicine. You have shown some exciting news on two very different applications for lactoferrin. One in treatment and prevention of cancer, and the other one in preservation of cognitive functions. Can you tell us more about it?
We studied the effect of complex of lactoferrin with oleic acid on the treatment cancer in mice, and we received good results that lactoferrin in complex with this fatty acid can prevent the cancer development in animals and help it to survive.
Diseases in the brain are increasing. Do you see any future application here for lactoferrin?
Certainly yes, and now there are quite a few papers and quite a few research is done everywhere in the world concerning the rescuing of newborn children from the consequences of hypoxia they have experienced in the intrauterine period. We experimented on animals, and in that design the pregnant rats were subjected to hypoxia. If to be short, some of them were treated with lactoferrin. The others were not, but started to be treated when lactation began. In both cases, lactoferrin rescued the progeny, the small rats, newborn rats, from losing their cognitive capacities. And in physiological experiments showed that lactoferrin brings the damaged brain to the normal level. I think that should be taken into consideration also in the practice of neonatologists.
You have shown some really exciting research about the use of ovo-lactoferrin in poultry farms. You were able to almost eliminate the use of antibiotics in your study. Where do you see lactoferrin in that in the future? I mean, this is really exciting.
Well, let's say that it was actually given not as antibiotics, because antibiotics are given therapeutically, and we actually used ovotransferrin and we gave it to those turkeys in the form of an aerosol, a spray, during they were walking around, and then afterwards they became infected. They got a natural infection, but they were protected, and the farmers did not have to use antibiotics due to the fact that before the infection those birds received a spray of ovotransferrin in the air actually.
What has to happen then that we in the future are able to use lactoferrin as a therapeutic?
You know, it's starting. A lot of people think effectively there is possibility to use lactoferrin, to use lactoperoxidase, to use lysozyme, the cocktail of everything, but it must be outside the activity of the milk dairy. And we cannot say, yes, with a lot of money we can always go faster. The idea is there, the protocol of each experience is there, but we have only 2 ends, and but we need a lot of people, we need a lot of things. But I am sure in a not so far future, lactoferrin is starting to be EFSA approval, and we are going to check also the possibility to have a pharma-grade lactoferrin. That is the future.
I can't tell you how excited I am about the new challenges ahead for lactoferrin. And the international collaborations are just something that was just such a welcome surprise at the meeting. I look forward to the challenges ahead.
Do you see any future application for lactoferrin in infant nutrition or infant health?
I do. I just think it's important to understand, since it's a protein, and proteins are in the infant for nutrition, then we need to know how it's being digested and whether it's surviving intact long enough to be bioactive.
Would you give your children lactoferrin?
Well, it's present naturally in milk, so I hope so. Yeah.
Where do you see your studies in the future? What is your next step?
We think it's important to understand the effect of lactoferrin in microbiome of infants, because the newborn babies and infants are exposed continuously to practices like C-section or ingest of antibiotics, and they can alter the microbiota. So it's important to understand what lactoferrin has an effect over these alterations in microbiota.
Would you give your wife and your kids lactoferrin?
Certainly yes, and I was asked in a previous conference of neonatologists. The only question I was asked, how to make our children more clever. And I said, when you are pregnant, lady, please take some lactoferrin.